we should be good to go. So just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a background. Clay and I, we did a podcast. I want to say what about a year ago, maybe even longer than that. I can't even recall during pandemic. Part of the Ivy podcast, just general interviewing a lot of C-level executives, technology executives, to be more precise, and just develop a good friendship relationship from there. And what we had discovered through a lot of the interactions, just very similarly, very entrepreneurial in nature, both of us, and the passion for real estate, which was even more exciting for me for selfish reasons, because I always love to just have a conversation like this and learn what are people doing, what are some of the things they invest in, what are mistakes they make, so I can hopefully learn from that. That's a personal interest of mine. So that's a little bit of a background. And a lot of the conversations, especially lately, with everything going on in the industry, everything going on in the markets, it's almost a conversation you can have with pretty much anybody, because everyone is involved in some shape or form of investing into real estate, either just through general home ownership or even just building out, portfolios just like you and I. So that's kind of a little bit of a background on our relationship with Clay. So Clay, thanks for making time for have this conversation.
Dude, honored to be on, man. Yeah, we the timeline of COVID messes everything up. I think we talked about 2 years ago. It also could have been 25 years ago. I don't know. But it was a pleasure, man. And I'm glad to be back on talking to you about a passion of both of ours around real estate.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great. So can you maybe share a little bit of a background on how just in general you got into real estate? Maybe share a little bit more. What were some of your initial investments? Curious to get a little bit background from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I bought our first house, single family home back in 2013-ish. So it's about a decade into real estate. My grandfather, my parents, my uncle, like I had people in my family who were interested in the space, had a couple rental properties, had bought land, had done different things. So it kind of been in my world of sorts, but I kind of got into it about a decade ago, as most people do, by purchasing their first home. And pretty quickly thereafter, we got a couple other single family homes. So and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. So the Raleigh market, we've, just by pure luck that this is where I grew up, this is where I settled, is now one of the hottest markets in real estate right now. So pretty lucky to have gotten in early. And again, there was no skill involved there. It just happened to be that's where I grew up and that's where I lived and that's where I started investing. And so started with a single family home, went in the like 3-bed, 2.5-bath, kind of starter home, 1960, 1970, 1980 build, and in good neighborhoods where we thought that things would appreciate, that we could get good renters in that ideally were long-term, meaning more than a year. And, kind of went down that path, had a lot of learnings along the way, and then realized, hey, like this is pretty good. This passive income thing, this real estate thing, reading a bunch of books, talking to other people like you about it. And the journey from there has been getting more into multifamily, into other areas of real estate, and thinking about kind of what's next. What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? And so now, I have over 250 units of varying things throughout the portfolio. And it's been a fun journey. And I, do some stuff with just my wife. I do some stuff with a couple business partners, with family, and kind of have spread it out a little bit, depending on what we're doing. But it's been a fun journey so far.
Oh, that's super exciting and very similar journeys. And I think for a lot of people, it starts out in a way where you purchase your own first primary residence and kind of go
Hey,
through
John,
that process.
that first check I wrote, man, I think a lot of listeners can probably appreciate that. You are so nervous, whether it's $10,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is probably the biggest check you've ever written, that first one. And I was sweating so much. I thought the thing was going to fly out the window, the cashier's check. Like I've never been more nervous in my life. And now, because I've done it so many times, right, with varying amounts, and, some real estate doesn't take a whole lot, right? You don't have to put a whole lot down, but I'm almost numb to it now, which is kind of scary on a whole different realm, but I will always remember writing that check and or getting that cashier's check and just being terrified about I have this amount of money in my hand and I can't lose it.
Yeah. Because for most of us, that first down payment check or whatever, that deposit check, it represents good chunk of the savings.
Yeah.
So you putting the entire thing into a single property is definitely nerve wracking. So I can definitely relate. Still remember those days as well on the first residence purchase, and so those are interesting times. A lot of great learning experiences. You've kind of understated the fact that 250 units is a significant portfolio. That's a substantial size. Can you share a little bit more about how do you construct your own real estate portfolio? What are the types of properties that you like to invest in, and just maybe a little overview about your personal real estate portfolio these days?
Yeah. So again, starting with the single family, which I think that's where most people start with, and then venturing into multifamily. And multifamily takes a lot of different definitions. I mean, that could mean apartments, it could mean condos, it could mean mobile home parks, it could mean a whole boatload of different avenues that you can take within multifamily. And we've touched a lot of those. But getting into multifamily requires more investment, which is where the partners come in because I get to share the risk and I get to share the reward, hopefully, with other people in my life that I care about. But that helps you scale, right? This isn't 250 on my own by any stretch of anyone's imagination. It is with a lot of people that have also invested their time, their money into building this, and all of us have W-2s, right? This isn't full time. This is something that we're doing on nights and weekends and early mornings. I know you're an early riser, John. So, this is the 5:30, AM thing. This is the 10:30 PM thing. This is the weekend thing. And trying to, build this up for probably reasons that we'll talk about going forward as to why I'm in real estate, why I want to do this, why I continue to try to invest in here, because, in the end, you got to have a why. But yeah, the portfolio has grown. I've started to diversify by type, right? Going from single family to multifamily and looking into commercial. But then my next venture, hopefully, is to diversify by location. A lot of the stuff that we've got is in the North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, kind of Southeast area, and would love to expand, right? Have a diversification by location. And that's even outside the US. I think there's some intriguing opportunities internationally as well, but that, there poses some challenges and opportunities to get into those markets. But I think that there's opportunity there too.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that I definitely want to double click on that a little bit further, especially investing, outside of your particular area, because I'm all about, the niche space of my own backyard. I invest only in South Florida, and even within South Florida, I invest in only like probably 3 or 4 areas within Fort Lauderdale where I personally reside for valid, for my own reasons, that I know those areas inside out. I have all of the relationships, because we'll talk about this, the importance of the network, not only from the investor perspective, but everyone that helps you, from property managers to cleaners to handyman, the general contractors, all of that. But investing outside of the area has been popping up, at least in my circles, new opportunities, new markets opening up, because just like in your backyard, South Florida has been exploding like crazy, and just to invest in that particular space have been presenting its own limitations. So from your standpoint, what is the ultimate goal? You've mentioned your why. What are you trying to do with the portfolio that you're currently building? What is the vision there with your real estate investment strategy and portfolio?
Yeah, in the end, it's probably a word that you hear a lot from people that are in this space, but it's freedom. It's freedom of time. It's freedom of attention. And, I saw my dad pass away at the age of 61, right on the verge of retirement. And he had worked his butt off to get to retirement and to have that time freedom and have that attention freedom. And he never got there. So I saw that firsthand, and that flipped a switch for me right away. And I said, okay, I've got little kids. I've got, just like you, I've got, a family that I want to spend time with. I want to spend my attention with. I'm extremely grateful for the career I've had from a lot of what we talked about beforehand in the previous episode, and grateful for the opportunities I've had and will continue to have in that space, in the analytics, data, IT space. But in the end, what's most important for me is that freedom of time, that freedom of attention, and real estate can allow for that and can accelerate when you can go do that. And there's a lot of other things that come into place, but that's my why, is to be able to spend that more time, more attention on the things that I really care about, that I'm on my deathbed thinking, I'm so glad that I spent the time and the attention on these things. And I'm hopeful that I can spend more of whatever life I have left on those important things. Even though I am extremely grateful for what I've had today and will continue to have with, my quote unquote W-2.
Mhm. No, that's powerful. Definitely powerful and relatable on so many levels. Like you mentioned, both have families with small children, and just to add a little bit more to that, for me, kind of building that generational wealth, also boils down to what is it that kind of that legacy that I'm leaving behind? What is it that I'm leaving for my kids, and things like that? And I've invested in all kinds of different stuff. I'm very active in venture capital and technology, as you know, and backing startups and things like that. But as far as having that very solid portfolio from real estate perspective, I have found, at least from a past performance or the past results, that at least in real estate you have the most control, in a sense. What are you selecting, and how do you essentially manage that portfolio? It's a lot within your personal control, where all other investment vehicles, such as the public markets and even the startups, a lot of things that you do an analysis as much as possible up front, but then a lot of variables outside of your control. It's not something that you can directly impact. So that's why, just to add a little bit more to kind of the reasons for real estate, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what you're saying, John, with the little kids around, and I would love to, you know, have them when they're of age to start managing some of this stuff, start to understand. And not only do you get to understand real estate, but you understand people, and you get to understand finances, and you get to understand kind of the power of this stuff. And 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 I think that, who knows, that's years down the road, but
Mhm.
in my mind, that makes the most sense right now, is how can I involve them in this so they get to know those different aspects of life through real estate. But at the same time, there's a lot, the word that, or the phrase that gets passed along in real estate all the time is passive income. As you know, it's not very passive. it it can be. It has moments of being passive. And I think over time, as you scale and you learn and you start to be able to delegate things, maybe to property managers and to other things, and you have the ability to do that. But when you're starting out, this thing is not passive. This thing is not passive at all. There's a lot of learnings. There's a lot of things from a tax standpoint, day-to-day operations, getting renters in. I mean, again, you have moments and months where it's like, man, I haven't heard from anyone. This is great. And then you have this barrage of just everything goes wrong, everything's the worst, right? And you're dealing with it all day, every day, while trying to juggle all the other things you have in your life. So for those that are out there that are thinking about starting, and you hear this thing, passive income, eventually, yes, but there's going to be moments where you're like, this thing is not passive at all whatsoever. I'm curious if you've been nodding along as we've been talking, but similar experience for you, John?
Oh, 1000%. Well, first of all, you crushed it with the point on getting your children involved in that business, because that's exactly the mindset, and it's top of my mind all the time. Because even now, my kids are small. The oldest one is 9 years old, but sometimes I kind of jab a little these like nuggets of information at him, as far as like, we're going to look at another property, and he asked like, why are we looking at all these houses? So just having that conversation, to me, that's super exciting. And then getting them at certain, engaged at certain age, just to understand the kind of how to run a business. Because at the end of the day, I view even real estate investments as, as businesses. You operate them as a business. You operate, whether that's a short-term rental or the annual leases, it's still a business at the end of the day. And I think those are invaluable experiences to learn, like hands-on, versus going through school. I think you know exactly what that means. But from passive perspective, that's 10,000% truth. Of course, you can structure it that way so that you completely hands off. But for me, it was never really an objective or a mission just to build something passive, because I don't believe in that. At the end of the day, even if you have the best property management companies managing all your portfolios, it's never passive, and you have to be involved. You have to be day in, day out. It just boils down to whether you enjoy that or not. So that's 1000%.
Yeah, and you won't know until you get in. And I've learned so much by being part of that day to day. I mean, going and, crouching under a sink and trying to fix something, right? Or dealing with tenants that maybe you have to, work with on a payment plan. I mean, all the gamut goes, from end to end. And while in the moment, sometimes those can be frustrating and thinking, man, I wish I was spending my time or my attention elsewhere. But the learnings looking back on that have helped propel me and made me look at things a little bit differently, look at investments differently, and think about, how do I value my time? Do I want to pay a property manager? Do I want to pay someone to do this? Or do I want to do it myself? Or do I want to, how do I structure my business, to your point? And without those learnings, I would never, have thought to do that.
Yeah, absolutely truth. So with that context, and we've seen the markets fluctuate, especially in the past, I want to say 2 years, tremendously. That I've never seen that before. But at the same time, with the current conditions that we're dealing with, there's a lot of course, the speculation and a lot of things that all of us are hearing on daily basis from the news and all of that stuff. Share with us your perspectives on everything that goes on in the current, real estate market in particular. How do you approach that? What is your mindset? Of course, there's, from prediction standpoint, there's not so much that, I don't really care about that. It's more of a mindset and kind of the investment thesis that you follow, and how do current conditions in the market really impact that, and what are some of the variables that you pay attention to? Maybe just talk through that mentality, talk through that thought process with us.
Long term, that's what it's all about for me. And it's making every single decision about the long term. So you're probably going to think I'm crazy. I don't really listen to the news. I don't follow the day to day. Where is the stock market going? Where is this going? I look at the market that I know well, which is Raleigh and the surrounding area. And I make investment decisions thinking, okay, I don't care about a year from now. I don't care about 3 years from now. I care about 20 years from now. Do I believe, knowing what I know, which I don't know everything, do I believe that this thing, that I could hand this to my son and it will be a positive business venture, and that this is an area that will appreciate, that will, that people will want to be a part of. And all I can do is the best of my ability based on my perspective and my opinions. But too much, and I use the comment about the news is because it is so short-term focused that it is the complete opposite of how I like to invest. There's a lot of people who do really good investments in real estate on a short-term basis, and they crush it, and good for them. That's just not my thesis. That's not my thing, because I'm all about long-term. So I don't subject myself to the daily news, because one, I probably, get sucked in and be like, oh, everything's the worst, I need to sell, it's just, so I just block it out. It's just not part of my thing. And I'm sure I miss a couple things and miss a couple opportunities, but I'm all long-term for me. So if you think about, like, right now, what prime interest rate, I think, is 6.25%.
Yep.
And probably going up a little bit more over the next couple quarters.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look historically, it's pretty average, honestly. I mean, in the late 90s, it was 8-9%, early 2000s, 8-9%, started going back down, went back up with the recession in 07, 08, and then, got pretty historically low. I think it got to 3.25 in 2018, 2019. Yep. And now it's, going back up. But everyone's freaking out because we just had 2 or 3 years of just unbelievable economic conditions, and real estate has, blown up in so many places like South Florida and Denver and Nashville and Raleigh. And now it's starting to chill. But I think that there's just automatically, like, sky is falling mentality when we're really just getting back to normal. And that's a lot. That's hard for people who especially are very short-term oriented to think about and to deal with. But what I see here, just from my long-term mentality, I don't think yet, but maybe in about a quarter, so we're talking early 2023, there's going to be a lot of really good buying opportunities, because there's a lot of people that are going to be short-term focused, or maybe over their skis from a debt standpoint, or, dealing with interest rates that aren't where they need to be for them, for their personal situation. And that means a lot of buying opportunities for people who are going to think longer term. So I'm excited about that. I don't like going to the grocery store and spending 20% more than I did last year. And I'm lucky to be in a nice, relatively comfortable position from a financial standpoint. I hate it for those that aren't in that spot, that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are day to day. And I'm very lucky to not be in that spot, but I hate that for them. That is terrible. And I think is going to get worse, unfortunately. But with a long-term mindset, there's going to be a lot of good buying opportunities coming forward.
Yeah, 100%. I love the whole long-term mentality, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, I've been, myself, for different reasons. When I was first starting out in real estate, I was doing a lot of flips, and it was very, very short-term thinking. It was very just trying to time the market. And it was a great learning experience for me, because, I've learned a lot through that exercise, but that really shaped my whole mindset, my whole vision about just real estate and how things work. That the most successful real estate investors and most successful just overall businessmen always have that long-term mentality, long-term thinking, versus just short-term gains, which is not necessarily developing that particular muscle that you need to sustain, times like this that we're all dealing with right now, which is, in my book, it's, where the market should be. It's more of a correction going down to the level where the market's supposed to be at, versus just treating that as, oh my God, just things are completely out of control. And I hear that on a daily basis in my circles with the other real estate investors who, operate in different types of property. So that's also very interesting. And it's your observation on kind of the first part of 2023. I can definitely see also a lot of different signs that point in that direction, that observing the overall performance of the market right now, at least, from South Florida perspective. I also see the trends going into just more of a further down correction, but from buying opportunities, I think you know, I am gearing up on more of a shopping spree, versus just trying to wait out what's going to happen in the market, and just structuring investment opportunities from that standpoint. So with that said, maybe not specifically from the real estate property type, or given market area that you operate in, what are you mostly excited about in shorter term as far as investment opportunities? You've mentioned some expansion outside of your playgrounds, even looking at some international markets, or maybe different property types. Just share some more insights on what's on your radar.
Yeah, and if we were having this conversation in a month or two, I may be able to speak more to the international piece, because I have a lot brewing there as far as learning. There's a lot of learning that needs to happen to understand the ability to go do that. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity, because I mean, if you look overseas, there's some currency struggles. There's they're being impacted a lot by what's going on with the war and a lot of things. And again, I think that means some buying opportunities, because if you're thinking long term, sure, you're going to have maybe some pain for the next couple of years, but people are still going to want to live in Italy. They're still going to want to live in Spain. They're going to want to live in these beautiful places. And that's the other thing, with COVID, everything changed with real estate, everything, because especially from a rental standpoint, you think of short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, even long-term rentals. Where do people want to be now? Most people want to be in a slower pace. They want to be in a place that's beautiful, natural beauty. They want to have low cost of living. They probably want to be in like mild to warm climates. And you can look at this as a long-term opportunity and think, okay, near where I live, or near somewhere in the US or internationally, where are people going to want, where does that happen? Where are those things? Because there are more companies that are moving remote. There are more people, this generation coming up expects to work remotely. If they're being asked to go into an office, they're not going to go. And so then they're going to go live in these places that have, people are still going to want to live in New York and cold cities and big cities and densely populated and all of that. I'm not saying that people are moving out of those cities, but there's going to be more opportunity in those milder climates, slower pace of life, lower cost of living. So I'm excited about looking at where those opportunities are, both domestically and internationally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I recently had a conversation with with my wife about a property we're looking to acquire. It's more of a it's on the luxury end as far as the price points as a single family, but the thesis there is that yes, recession is gonna, we're all dealing with that. So, some cutting measures all around, but the target audience as far as for that particular property are the families with children, maybe small children or whatever different ages that we still, when schools are off, we're still going to travel. You're still going to need to spend time as a family. And especially if you have, probably more than one child, or if you have more than two kids, getting a hotel, getting something, staying at a hotel is never an option. It's just, you confined to just a one single room. So single family homes become a lot more attractive, even in markets where, seems the economic downturn is going in the opposite direction. So the play there is continue investing in properties that target that specific audience, like such as families with children, would continue being high demand. So that's just the area that I've been observing a lot. I've been more and more interested in that space from short-term and mid-term rental perspective. And then the other spectrum of that is recently I've been exposed to investment opportunities in co-working spaces, which is I actually have an office in a co-working space just like this, and it's been interesting to observe because you read all these different industry studies, publications by Moody's and all of that, where they talk about commercial real estate from companies just maybe re-signing the lease or maybe terminating the leases. And an interesting trend that I've been observing is kind of the growth in the co-working space, that even the companies that do have tremendous office spaces, they still demand for the property management of that building, let's say, to have an amenity for co-working space, because hybrid working environments, virtual working environments, you still need some type of amenity to be able to bring the workers from that standpoint. So those are just kind of my two cents into what you've been talking about as far as investment opportunities.
Yeah, John, the Airbnb and luxury kind of family week long, month long rentals is super interesting for me because of, where I am in my life. I don't want to be managing that, but if I can figure out, to your point earlier, if I can have that property manager that I'm in touch with maybe once every 2 weeks, once every month, checking in, dealing with emergencies only, then I'm all in on that type of stuff, because I do think that's how people want to vacation now. They realize the power of having their own kitchen, having the separate bedrooms. And the beauty is that you know you know what you want when you travel with kids.
Right.
You know the things. So when you walk into a house, you're like, oh, I can see my family here, or I can see a family like mine here. And it has, it checks these different boxes, right? It has multiple rooms, or it has bunk beds, or space for bunk beds, or it's got a pool, or it's got whatever. And so because you have that viewpoint, you can be really successful in that, because you can think like someone who's your target audience. But I think too often people try to do something that they just don't know at all.
Right.
And so if you're going
Right.
to start out, I think starting out with something like that, if you're going into a new space, do something that's like, I would rent this place, or my family would rent this place, because you're going to think you're going to have a higher return on the value if you can walk into a place and think, I know this spot, because you're going to set it up the way it needs to be done. And then you're going to be able to charge more. You're going to be able to get higher occupancy, better ratings, and it's just going to compound on one another.
Man, that's why I love talking to you, because you always crush it from points as such, because it makes perfect sense, right? It's at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to get into a STR or midterm rental and try to target, I don't know, digital nomads, the single guys, single girls that travel and they just work in groups, because I wouldn't know what they do, what they need. But to your point, just being able to really understand who your target audience is and try to cater from that perspective, and just being yourself in that type of setting, I think that puts you in definitely a new bracket as far as having that advantage over other competition maybe that's in that area. So that's a great point you made. I wasn't even kind of formulating from that standpoint. Um, I read your, I don't know if it's weekly or bi-weekly now,
The
newsletter.
biweekly newsletter. Yeah, man.
Is bi-weekly now, and we definitely gotta, we'll link to the in this episode. There's a lot of different just frames of thoughts that you share, from just overall, from productivity to innovation to just overall kind of what's on your mind, different quotes and recommendations. Maybe share a little bit more about that. What are you trying to do there? What's the motivation behind that? Just a little bit more insight into that biweekly newsletter, Building with Clay.
That's kind of you to ask. I got to give a shout out to Chad Olds, who's in the IT world too, executive. He's the one that came up with the name Build with Clay. So nice little pun there. So I got to give a little shout out. But
I love,
yes,
the name is catchy. Name is super catchy.
So I started the newsletter about 2 years ago. I'm actually coming up on 2 years. I just released number 50.
Wow.
So I've maintained my consistency every 2 weeks, every Tuesday, and I got some great advice from a friend at the beginning to say, hey, you should make every newsletter a topic, and not just like give your random thoughts about anything. Just so, it could be hurry, it could be, scale, it could be efficiency, it could be, whatever word comes to mind. And so I've done one on dogs as an example. So I run the run the gamut there. But where I go with it, I don't know. To answer your question, I really enjoy it. Forces me to consolidate my thoughts. I do a lot of reading, articles, books, talking to others, and it forces me to consolidate my thoughts, or kind of mate 2 ideas or 3 ideas or 4 ideas. Right? I read different things from different perspectives and try to bring them together, and it forces me to sit down and really consolidate my thoughts. And if one person reads it, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever. But it's a nice way for me to consolidate things. And if in the end, John, it turns into my kids are scrolling through it in 10 years and they're like, wow, this is what my dad thought about, back in the day, that's awesome. But my overall goal when I started it, and it still is to this day, is if I can spark inspiration in one person every newsletter, if they read it and they're like, ooh, I should try this, or, oh, that makes me think I want to do this, or I want to reach out to someone I haven't talked to in 2 years and just say hello to them, right? Whatever inspiration that it sparked, that's in some sort of personal growth, personal way. That's what I'm all about, man. And that if I can make one person do that makes the whole process of writing it, of delivering it, of doing it consistently, it makes it worth it.
I love it. I love it, my man, because I know for a fact that the best and the most successful businesses, or the startups that have either been sold, acquired, or whatever the case is, have been born from that personal motivation, from that personal need to have something that's working for me. And then without any, economic or financial motivations, build something from that perspective. And if that brings value, like you said, at least to one person, I guarantee you that's one of the key ingredients for very successful businesses. So I'm not going to be surprised if a few years down the road we see that Build with Clay newsletter has been picked up by, I don't know, some major media company or whatever the case is. I'm not going to be surprised.
That's quite the that'd be quite the compliment if that were the case. But yeah, I make zero money from it. I don't have any ads. I don't do anything with it. There is no, like I said, I'm in a lucky position with other things that I don't need it to be an income producing thing. So I do it purely for myself, one, and two, for hopefully others to get value from. So I appreciate the kind words, John.
Hey, I'm there. I'm reading it. So that's, that I enjoy that. So definitely keep putting them out there. And Clay, just overall, thanks so much, man, for your time today. It was a great conversation. I enjoy talks like this. I'm confident this is not going to be a last episode with you. I'm going to tap into that wisdom of yours, periodically. So I definitely appreciate you making time for us today.
And John, I want to say, man, the podcast I did with you 2 years ago, roughly, that was the first podcast I was a guest of. And since then I started my newsletter. Really? Wow. I started my own podcast. And so speaking of inspiration, you have been an inspiration for me, right? I don't think I would have gotten that feel for that, oh man, I think I could do a podcast, or I really like that. And so I'm extremely thankful for you, for the cold reach out and now becoming friends, talking real estate, talking business, kids, all that fun stuff. So I want to thank you for helping me, tailor my journey to where it is today, and looking forward to the future with you, man.
Hey, I appreciate the kind words, man. Made my day for sure. And I'm confident that, outside of these just virtual interactions, virtual friendship, that we got to make some deals happen. We got to hang out in person one day. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
That sounds great, John. Thanks for having me on.